A fresh face-off that has erupted between Twitter and the centre over NDA government's takedown orders against provocative, insightful posts. First, the social media giant objected to the Indian government's policies and Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and then it failed to comply with Government of India's takedown orders, and now it is suing the Government of India for alleged abuse of power.
Let's tell you exactly how it started. It was the Modi government who had asked Twitter to take down misleading content related to the farmers' protest and the farm laws. This came after a new IT Act that was brought to keep a check on insightful, hateful and even the fake news propaganda.
सोशल मीडिया एक बहुत ही पावरफुल मीडियम है, हमारी लाइफ में आज बहुत बड़ा प्रभाव है। इसकी अकाउंटेबिलिटी कैसे हो, ये क्वेश्चन दुनिया में सब जगह अभी एक बहुत ही वैलिड क्वेश्चन बन चुका है। सोशल मीडिया को अकाउंटेबल करना ज़रूरी है। कैसे अकाउंटेबल करें? सबसे पहले सेल्फ रेगुलेशन, किस तरह से खुद ही कुछ ऐसे कंटेंट जिन कंटेंट से सोसाइटी में एक हार्मफुल इम्पैक्ट आता है उसको खुद ही दूर करें। फिर इंडस्ट्री रेगुलेशन, फिर गवर्नमेंट रेगुलेशन। तो हर तरह का एक ऐसा इकोसिस्टम, ऐसा थॉट प्रोसेस अभी बन रहा है दुनिया में सब जगह और देश में भी, अपने यहाँ भी, कि सोशल मीडिया शुड बी अकाउंटेबल।
So when the farmers' protest was being held at Delhi borders, BJP's MP Tejasvi Surya had written to the Prime Minister seeking effective resolution of content on social media. So the government now issued a notice to Twitter seeking removal of such posts which were deemed inflammatory, but this led to further heated arguments that ensued between the two sides, that is the Government of India and Twitter, to take down the content.
Meanwhile, there were multiple directives that were issued to curb inflammatory tweets, but Twitter apparently failed to comply with the government's directive. Inflammatory posts continue to swell on microblogging site and fueling major agitations. Now, after a year and a half of this friction, Twitter has now filed a suit in Karnataka High Court challenging the centre's takedown orders.
Alleging abuse of power by Indian officials, Twitter has moved the Karnataka High Court against the Indian government's order as per reports. Twitter was warned by the Indian IT Ministry of criminal proceedings if it does not comply with its content order. The IT Ministry had given the social media platform time till July 4 to comply with its order. Otherwise, Twitter is going to lose its status, which means Twitter itself will be liable for any sort of comment or post that's been made in Twitter itself. Now, day after the deadline, Twitter has took to legal recourse, and now, as we know, that on 27th of June the IT Ministry had issued its last order to Twitter, but Twitter has failed to comply with its order. IT Ministry specifically has maintained that the Twitter has to appoint a grievance officer, a chief compliance officer out here in India, but clearly they have failed to do so, and a day after the deadline, they have took to the Karnataka High Court to take action against the Indian government.
All right, my colleague Sharon now joins us live on this broadcast. So Sharon, what started from during the farmers' protest between the Government of India and Twitter? The Twitter has now filed a suit in the Karnataka High Court challenging centre's takedown orders.
Well, this is in fact a very long tussle that has in fact been happening between the Twitter and the Government of India. We have seen in 2021, and like you rightly pointed out, it was during the farmers' agitation when there were in fact certain Twitter accounts which the government said are not complying with the IT rules within the country, and hence Twitter should take down these Twitter accounts. So there were about 85 such Twitter accounts that were involved, according to the Indian government, were flouting the IT rule, and also there were activists who were involved in Pakistan. There were other journalist accounts as well. They, in fact, the government has requested Twitter to take down those accounts. We have seen time and again there has been statements that has come from Twitter saying that they are not not going to curtail the freedom of speech, and hence they didn't comply with any such request that was made by the Government of India. Now, a series of notices were sent to Twitter India. We have seen the last one, in fact, was sent on 27th of June. To July 4th is when was the last date that Twitter had to, in fact, comply with the rules, with the request that was made by Twitter, by the Government of India, which was not done. And on the other hand, we are seeing that the Twitter has, in fact, gone ahead and has filed a lawsuit against the Government of India. So we have to, of course, see how the government is going to handle this situation, because this is a long ongoing tussle between...
Absolutely, Sharon, because if we talk about the new rules that were set in place, it was actually Twitter only. The major social media giants had complied with the new regulations that were put in forth by the Government of India. It was Twitter mainly who had a problem, and it took a long time enough to comply with the new regulations.
Absolutely, and we have seen how there were, in fact, multiple chances that were given by the Government of India. There were about 85 such accounts which the government felt were flouting the IT rules which is existing in the country, and that is why there were multiple notices that were sent to Twitter India. We have seen how they were asked on 6th of June, later they were asked on 17th June as well, and the last notice, in fact, went to Twitter India on the 27th of June. And 4th of July is the last date when the Twitter India was supposed to comply. But we have seen from day one that there has, in fact, the Twitter India has, in fact, been saying that the government is trying to curtail the freedom of speech, and this is not the policy of Twitter India, is what the statement they have been maintaining. So, of course, how is the situation going to be dealt with? We know that a case has been filed by Twitter.
That is now expected to take a legal route now, as Twitter has now approached the Karnataka High Court with this case that has been registered against the Government of India. For the moment, Sharon, thanks very much for joining in. Now, the new